Hey, what's up everyone? Eric Rossi, the guy with the eye here. Today I'm going to tell you about the Fuji X-E3. Now you saw my first impressions video, if you watched it, that I was pretty excited to check it out because of what it can offer in the small package of it and the features of basically an X-T2 with an X Pro 2, which I do own. So I wanted to answer my own questions is, would I sell my X Pro 2 or maybe substitute that with something like the X-E3? Let's talk about it. So this little guy right here has brought a lot of promise for 2017 and going forward, especially compared to what Fuji's about to release in the early 2018 season for the XH1 or whatever it's going to be. And with that, for about $1,150, would something like this be that substantial to use compared to something like the X Pro 2 that's about almost around $2,000? And I'll tell you what, I had a fantastic, for the most part, experience shooting this little guy right here. I mean, the size of this is pretty good. I'm usually really big on the ergonomics of a camera, and even though that this is a little bit smaller, it actually fits my hand decently, and only because of what it has with like the little nub back here where you can place your thumb, and it actually helps out a ton. I didn't really feel I needed a strap for something like this because I could actually pretty much fit it in like my hoodie or jacket pocket, and it worked out very, very well. The only thing I wish that this had, that this borrowed from like an X Pro 2, especially at the top right here, is the external ISO dial, because on here you have a basic layout of what you have, exposure compensation, and your shutter dial right here where you can pretty much go in and just, you know, quickly change. But the only other way to access ISO is you can map it to something else, maybe one of these controls or something. But you could also, I have it to swipe down. The cool part about this X-E3 is this touchscreen back here. Now there is no tilt screen or anything like that, but it's a limited touch capacity. Like, you can't do a ton with it, but it has some quick access features. Like, you can swipe down, up, left, right to access certain things. Like, for example, I have this set, so if I swipe to the left, it'll give me the film simulations. And if I swipe down, it'll give me my ISO, and I could easily change it from there. The other cool thing about this screen is that you can use it for touch to focus. But there was one major annoyance I had with this, and it kind of should be addressed. And I kind of feel that most people will shoot this way, so that way they can use the touchscreen to focus, but they also want to also just focus normally using the shutter or back button focusing or something like that. But what I found was when I went to go put it up to my face and my nose would hit the screen back here, it would obviously move the autofocusing point, but which you can't move it after that. So then if I noticed that the focus wasn't where I wanted, I then tried to use the joystick in the back, which is absolutely amazing, but the point wouldn't move. So I'd have to go to the top left of the screen, take my eye off, turn autofocusing back on, and then I can move the autofocusing points around again. So that's if you want to shoot that mode. You don't have to. But it's just something to note that you're like, oh, come on, this was just an annoyance. So if you want to use that, be careful where you're pointing your beak, because it could annoy you too. But like mentioning, features-wise, this does have the similar 24 megapixel sensor as the X Pro 2. This does have 4K video actually at 30 frames per second. And it is a little bit better, especially with the 91 autofocusing point system in this with the phase, is that it's a little bit more accurate, especially compared to the X100F, which wasn't that good. The X-T2 is a good video play if you want to get in the Fuji. But once again, Fuji still isn't the best when it comes to video, but they're really working on that for some of their upcoming stuff. But firmware updates and stuff can really improve it. If you want 4K in the Fuji lineup, you got this and this little crop body right here. So that's a big thing, but I really don't talk with a ton of video on this because it's not their strong suit, so I'll just move on. I was mentioning the performance of this guy is actually very good. It might be a little bit slow at times, but for the most part, it's pretty fast for autofocus. It's snappy. It pretty much borrows what's in here in the X-T2 as well, so it's a good thing. And the battery life, I was outside. It was very cold. It was like 25 degrees. And I was out for hours for a couple days and everything when I was using this outside, and the battery life is actually very, very good. And it really didn't, ding down enough compared to some of the other stuff that I've used. And once again, cold temperatures drain batteries pretty fast. So this actually handled up very well. So the battery life, superb for that regard. And as you'll know right here that this has an EVF. There's no optical viewfinder. So as you go to look and everything, it's actually very sharp. The one thing I did notice though is that you did have to get very close to the sensor at times for it to actually switch, especially if you go between the EVF and the Live View right here. So keep that in mind. Not as bad as like the Hasselblad X1D or anything, but sometimes it was a little finicky in regards to that. And the other thing I noticed, not in the EVF, but more if you use Live View, which I really do like Live View for street stuff, is that it was pretty good, but it was laggy at times. Like I could be using the camera, take a photo, go to find a new scene or something, and I go to, look up and I try to autofocus or something, and the screen will just jitter and lag for like a second or 2 seconds and then get to normal. So very, very weird. That could be fixed with firmware, but just something to notate. And I had a couple other friends notice that as well. The other thing besides that, and pretty much my last annoyance with this camera, is something that's been vocalized as well. And while the screen's not bad, you got the limited touchscreen, you can zoom and everything, is that it's not a good screen. I can't tell at times, or most of the time, if the image is actually sharp. The screen just isn't that good, and I'm sitting there looking at it like, did I misfocus or something? And be it, I go to the computer, it's absolutely fine, I did exactly what I needed, but the screen is just not that good, and I don't know if the photo was sharp or not. That is not user error, that is something that needs to be addressed with this camera, because on this X Pro 2 right here, be it it's not touchscreen or anything like that, this is an amazing screen. The image quality is absolutely superior. It's very, very good with this. The black and whites I was able to pull out of this, the dynamic range, really stack up to, well, the dynamic range is better than this, but the Ricoh GR2 is one of my favorite street cameras of all time because of the versatility and the range you can pull out of it, especially for black and whites. And this lives up to this as well. And the DR, the dynamic range, is very, very good. You can pull back the highlights. You can recover a lot of stuff. You can expose some of the shadows to help out if you really need. And you don't see a lot of artifacting or anything. Now, like I said, it's pretty good. But if you are in an extreme scenario, like I'll show one where it was a little bit wider, and you'll see that I had to pull back the shadows a little bit to really test this. And you do get some chromatic aberration and stuff like that. So, be it that was with the 23mm f2 lens. That could be more of a lens thing, not 100% just on the camera, but it's pretty dang good for what it is. And in lower light situations, I had no problem throwing this to 1600 ISO, very, very usable. And then even throwing it to 3200 and going a little bit black and white was absolutely usable as well. So I was in some low light situations as it was turning more towards dusk, and you were, relying on like street lights and stuff like that to really make things happen. And this handled things well. I'm very, very impressed by this, and I'm glad B&H Photo actually sent this out so that way I could review it and share my thoughts about this. Because like I said, I've been very interested in seeing if I could buy this. Once again, B&H sent this out. They're not sponsoring. They're not paying for this in any way. Just providing this so I could share my experience. And for the most part, this is a pretty simple buy. The biggest thing for me, though, is the screen and a couple little features that it doesn't have. The screen, for me, is one of the most annoying things, especially with the autofocusing use, and with the screen not being that sharp upon playback. I've heard mixed things about that. A lot of the people I hear are experiencing that as well, that they look at it and they're like, why isn't this that sharp? But other than that, this packs pretty much everything that this has in a very smaller package that, you can go here. So I do recommend the Fuji X-E3 for the most part, but would I sell my X Pro 2 for it? I don't. And, I could save hundreds of dollars by doing that because I have the same lens that I can use it. But that's pretty much that being said. Still use my X Pro 2. The X-E3 is still pretty tempting if I want to save a couple $100 someday. But if you want it, I would recommend it. It's a great little camera if you could put up with just a little bit things about it. And it's great. And for the $1,150, it'll come with the 23mm f2 kit lens and this little X8 flash as well. Like I was mentioning when I was doing the unboxing, I had no idea it would come with something like that. It is a hot shoe mount, so you put it in, turn it off, and you have a little type of thing right here. So if I go to, there you go. That should have come out this time. So it does slow your camera down a little bit when you're trying to use this, but the fact that it comes with it, it's a pretty cool thing. So to round it off, what would you buy? This is a great option for the price. If you can afford to go with the X Pro 2, I personally like the X Pro 2, but if you don't have the price, go with the X-E3. The other question comes down to the X100F. I easily enjoyed that camera this year. But the autofocusing wasn't as fast compared to the X Pro 2. That's why I spent the extra money and went that route. And I just feel like having the ability to change the lenses on these cameras is more versatile and definitely a better option for what you can do and for the lenses that Fuji has for these cameras. So the X100F, great all-in-one walk-around type camera that you can use teleconverters for, or wide-angle adapters, so you could change up the view. But to me, it's between these two. Like I said, though, for about $700 to some $100 less, you can get pretty much what it's like, and just a couple little quirks that might not annoy you as they did me, but I would highly recommend this. Check any links down below if you want to, look into them more. But that's the Fuji X-E3. I really enjoyed the image quality from that camera, and I think that it's pretty much like an X Pro 2 and an X-T2. It's a very good mix for the price point.